Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Goldfish Report. I'm your host, Louisa, and this is our weekly country roads with Winston Shrout. And we have Winston joining us. How are you today, Winston?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Actually, I'm feeling pretty good. I went out yesterday and got me a store-bought haircut, so looking a little bit better here.
Quite spiffy. Very
Hey,
spiffy.
you know what a store-bought haircut is, don't you?
Store-bought. What'd you do? What'd you do? Did you get one of those Flowbee machines and it's like a vacuum and it cuts the hair and you're like
No,
all even?
uh, no, a store-bought haircut is different than a homemade haircut. I had a friend years ago. He had grown up real poor in Mexico, and so when the boys needed a haircut, the mother got out the scissors and whatnot, and went to work on them. But he said when he got to be old enough to get a job and have his own money, he decided he would go to a barber shop and get a store-bought haircut.
That's funny.
Anyway, he said he really liked it. So he said the next time, he said he went and bought another one.
Oh, that's pretty funny. That's
Yeah,
funny.
store-bought haircut, kind of a hillbilly kind of look, kind of an idea. But, I will have to report that I have been getting quite a few inquiries by teenagers
Mm.
about joining up with the Appalachian Descendant Masters stuff. I just have to, you'll just have to wait until you're 18 because when you have to have parental consent. And then one of them had sent me an email, said he just had escaped from a hillbilly reprogramming thing.
My
His
goodness.
parents put, oh yeah, his parents put him into some kind of reprogram. I guess they caught him doing ham bone or something. So they figured he needed reprogramming.
That's pretty
So
funny.
anyway, he was kidnapped by people wearing, three-piece suits, wingtip, shoes and all that kind of stuff. And they subjected him to all kinds of reprogramming. For instance, they put electrodes around his head, and around his body and stuff. And they would play Bill Monroe bluegrass music. And then every about 15 or 20 seconds, they shock him.
Oh my God.
Oh, well, yeah. He said the whole time he was there, said they did nothing but play Beatles music. So, okay, I'm
The
just joking with you.
reprogramming. Yeah, no, it's a
Reprogramming the hillbillies.
Billy. There you go.
Anyway, just a little bit of humor. Well,
No,
today
no,
we
it's
had
always
some.
appreciated. Yeah, it's always appreciated, especially at the end of the week when we're all kind of ragged and kind of waiting for some.
Well, that's true. Well, things are moving forward in a lot of different areas and stuff.
Hmm.
Some of it I have some, pretty good information on.
Right, and so this week we're going to do a little bit of analysis on current events, and how they relate to our current day,
Yeah.
within the context of some of the history behind these current events. Did you want
Yeah,
to go?
I hear things on the internet causing me a great deal of concern. Uh, for instance, we had, I don't know how many, about 3 or 4 times ago, we had spent, I think, 2 hours talking about the history of the Khazarians and stuff. If you recall, we had referred
Right.
to this book here. Well written book, well documented and everything. And they were simply trying to point out the history of the Khazarians and their evolution into modern Jewry. So when I hear commentators, give reports and whatnot on the internet, you know, sometimes it, it's irritating. The information is here. Why do they keep this up? Because this whole business about moving the U.S. embassy into Jerusalem and this, that, and the other, and Christians, as they think, start on this whole business about the chosen people.
Mm.
Oh my goodness! Listen, I've had some really. Matter of fact, this before we even get started, let me just tell you this experience I had. I mean, these are things these are real life experiences, and that was if you go back in Mormon theology, they have this business about they have what they call the presiding bishop, and according to the doctrine, if a literal descendant of Levi, In other words, someone with the Levitical priesthood, if someone who was a natural lineal descendant of Levi would show up in the Mormon church, they could be the presiding bishop, according to that theology, history, and doctrine, and so forth. So, I don't know, in the early 70s, there was a guy, and actually he was teaching at one of the universities there in Utah. So he shows up to the church authorities, having discovered this, and he claimed to be a literal descendant of Levi. Because he wanted to, and he was a Khazarian. That's what he was. Anyway, the church, runs some information on him because, they have the biggest, genealogical research center, on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So they started searching out this guy's genealogy. They found out he was lying to him.
Oh,
so anyway, then he went and tried to persuade one of the what you would call Mormon offshoot groups, and there's quite a few of them around. And he tried to persuade them, and at first they weren't going for it, but then there's certain things that happened, and they started taking up with him, and he did have a lot of influence among that group of Mormons, and to their detriment. And I'll tell you why. Because as it turned out, one of that group, he was kind of an entrepreneurial kind of guy, and was looking at different things. And he had purchased an island out in the middle of the Pacific. I think it was just some rock sticking up somewhere. But based on that island that he bought, I think it was somewhere around in the Tahiti area, somewhere over there. Well, he went and set up a whole government based on that rock. And yeah, he registered, just like, any country would, I guess, with a Hague or something like that. He got a flag, and he was building the government and the monetary system, all that kind of stuff. So when this fellow found out about that, he wanted to utilize it, because with an acknowledged government and a flag, there were things that could be done internationally. Now, what the problem was in the 70s, the Congress had passed a law because of the problem in South Africa with apartheid. Mm-hmm. They passed a law that anybody that did business with South Africa and the Praetorian government would disqualify themselves from any kind of U.S. monetary aid, and that would include Israel. So they, Jim's worked on that quite a bit.
Yep.
But
anyway,
but the problem was that Israel was getting a lot of their nuclear supplies. I mean, maybe heavy water or some nuclear things. They were getting all that from South Africa. And so if they kept doing that, then the United States under the Congress would have cut off all monetary aid to Israel. They didn't want that to happen, because they had that nuclear stuff going on there at Dimona. They were developing bombs, and so they had to have what South Africa was producing. But if they did business with them because of the apartheid with the Praetorian government, there is going to cause them problems. So what this guy did was, this guy that had the country on this rock out in the middle of the ocean and had a flag. What he did, because the deal that the Israelis were doing, in payment for the nuclear supplies and so forth from South Africa, they were supplying them with guns and arms. And so if they kept doing that, they knew that the United States would cut off all aid. So what this guy did, he arranged for this guy that had this country that had a flag. They got a ship, put this country's flag on it, and under that flag, they shipped arms into South Africa so that it wouldn't appear that Israel was shipping arms into South Africa so they could keep their supply going. Now
Mm-hmm.
these are things I knew about. I mean, I'm not blowing smoke at people. I've had some interesting life experiences, and this is one of them. And so, this is real. This is real. This is something I knew the people. I knew the people involved.
Oh.
And then, of course, for their good works and everything, the leaders of this uh, group, they went to Israel, and they planted a tree and put their name on it and all that kind of thing, and recognized them. Of course, as soon as they left Israel, they took their name off and put somebody else's on there. That's that big deal. But they completely hoodwinked them people. Completely
Yeah.
hoodwinked them based on, a Mormon doctrine tradition.
Mm.
And then somebody showed up claiming to be. They didn't do diligence on the guy like the corporate church did. They did diligence, said no, you're not.
Mm.
This other group didn't, pay much mind to that. And then you see the result of it. You see the result. Now, this guy that did this, we looked at him. He was Mossad, and
Well,
so we see all this crap going on all the time.
well, there's on the subject of revealing crimes and such. I wanted to inform our viewers who haven't seen today's news. I'm going to just screen share really quick something that I think is of interest to our current events. This is an unsealing order from the United States District Court in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And this is regarding, it's an application to unseal the documents by United States Attorney Amanda Kramer and Stephanie Lake. And it is ordered, it is a signed order, that the search and seizure warrant and its attachments are hereby unsealed as of yesterday. These are the files that pertain to the Anthony Weiner laptop, and it's going to be very interesting. Now, Q has also warned us that, here comes the pain, and I think this is it. And so stand by, folks. Let's wait and see what happens when these are unsealed. Only an attorney can access those documents right now because that's a federal court, but I think they are going to make them available. If they're unsealed, the public can see them. Isn't that right, Winston?
Yeah, I suppose so.
If
I
they're
don't
interested.
particularly care to look at them myself.
Yeah.
I'll be ever so happy when we get past all this foolishness.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be painful, but please, to the listening audience, don't become hooked into all that. Yeah, you can go look at it and you can listen to what's going on, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But as we have, spoken of in the past, exercise loving detachment. In other words, get outside of it and look at it. Don't become emotionally hooked
Well,
into what's going on.
I think the most important part of this isn't it's not at all a kind of like salacious kind of thing. What this is doing, what the president is doing, and through the help of Q, and informing us, is that these people need to be held accountable for their crimes. But the fact that the Democrats have come out and attacked President Trump so intensely before he even did anything, before he was even inaugurated, they were attacking him, and they didn't even. I mean, how ridiculous is this, folks? So this was, uh, clearly Hillary didn't think she was going to lose, and there was an insurance policy, and there's all that stuff going on. But they really needed to make this not look like retaliation for what the Democratic Party did. And they're supported by, I guess I would say the KHAZARIAN agenda. So this has to come out, and it's going to be painful. It really will. It's going to be disgusting. I have a feeling. People are going to be shocked. to learn what is on that laptop and what they were actually doing to people. And and only then is it going to be perceived as a legitimate prosecution. Only then are all these indictments going to be unsealed and made public. Only then, once this kind of information is revealed, can the public accept what is coming. And what's coming is they're taking down the deep state. And that's the fake Democratic Party. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of Republicans who are involved in that, plenty of rhinos, as we know them. So I wanted to just kind of get that out of the way right off the top, because we cover the president in our POTUS reports, and that is a development that I wanted to share with everybody. So it is for a specific reason. If this does get released, it's because people need to see the evidence to understand why these indictments and arrests and these military tribunals are coming. And so, and I think it's smart, because you have public opinion who you would think that there's unfortunately, a lot of sheep who don't think critically for themselves. And it's not their fault. They just haven't been trained to do it, or they haven't learned how to do it. It's just that they just go along with whatever people say, rather than thinking critically and really looking for the truth behind everything. You have to think for yourselves, folks. You can't just listen to these people. You can't just listen to CNN. You can't just listen. And I know most of our viewers, get it. So it's not you I'm talking to. It's that new viewer who stumbles upon GoldFish Report and, doesn't really know what we're about. And so that's why I'm trying to say, I'm always keeping in mind the new ones who are just awakening, because they're going to need the most help. So I wanted to put that into the context, because there's no way that what's coming with the military tribunals and all these almost 30,000 now sealed indictments, there's no way this is going to be looked at as valid and accepted as valid unless the real actual evidence comes forward. And of course you could see it, and we'll just wait and see. So Winston, I know that that's a great segue into where you want to go with this. So
Yeah, yeah. People need to wake up and look at things. It's unfortunate that these things have been allowed to continue as long as they have, but it is what it is. And so there's going to be a lot of mental anguish
mm-hmm.
and different things that people are going to experience. And so you have to stand strong. And like I was saying the other day when we had that thing about that one interview about money and Ayn Rand,
Mm-hmm.
again, that essay or what it was, or what you want to call it, she put out, again, it was an essay on morality, on ethics, which are things which have been attacked
Right.
over the years through the education system, through the media, and all those kind of things. So I mean, I'm not just talking about when we talk about morality, we're not just talking about sex and the things that go with that. We're talking about how people live their life. How do you treat your neighbors? How do you treat your family? And so, in Ayn Rand's case, she was simply commenting on the money angle as far as the morality and ethics. But it's the same thing in all that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have principles that you stand for?
Right.
How did you come by those principles?
Who are you? That's really the question. And many
Yeah,
people don't, I mean, there's people who really haven't explored that to find out who they really are. Because what we're talking about, I know we haven't really said anything specific, but what's going to come out is it's going to be information about child trafficking,
yeah,
using children in sacrifices, not just human trafficking, not just adults. And we're talking, the most prized possession of our humanity is our children, and to know how these children have been treated over and over and over and such for a long, long time, it's going to make everybody quite sick. Quite honestly, I can't imagine anybody who's going to learn about this information and not, become physically sick over it. Uh,
that's
but
true.
but what's important to remember is that there is a process in place now that has changed, that are going to hold these people accountable, and you don't need to be violent about it. So there's no need to be violent. Just be thankful that President Trump is a person who's dedicated to making this happen, and also has some help from unusual sources. And we're going to talk about some of that today too. But go ahead, Winston. I'm waiting to hear what you have to. I know you were talking about an interesting Veterans Today article by Preston James.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it came out in 2014, about, almost 4 years ago.
mm,
And I think a lot of people probably saw it at that time. I downloaded it and put it on my computer, for further reference, but it goes right along with the expose we had done on the 13th tribe, or the KHAZARIANs,
yeah.
which in our present world comprise about 90% of modern Jewry. Now the other 10% are dispersed in and out, but the bloodline tribe of Judah people, which they call Sephardic,
Mm.
and they didn't go back to Jerusalem. Then we'll get it. We'll talk a little bit more, because I want to give a chronological history here.
Okay.
Here the people can see a little bit closer. But anyway, let me just screen share for a moment.
Okay.
This particular article, I'll send it to you. You can, put it up for people.
Okay.
Let's see here.
It's
Got all this.
interesting, Winston, and I think it's important, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this, because it is important for us to understand the history, because that gives us context as to where we are currently.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that what's going on. And I also have some comments. Something that kind of occurred to me last night, a revelation that might be related.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at this. This was posted by Preston James on Veterans Today,
Yeah.
and the title of it is "The Secret Space War,
Mm-hmm.
or the Draco Secret War Against American Goyim." Now, again, we're getting into a little bit of woo-woo here, as far as not the normal. And I think Preston James probably thought, man, if I put this on Veterans Today, how is this going to be received when I start talking about Draco reptilians?
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people have listened to what Randy Kramer has brought out, what Corey Good has brought out, and
Mm-hmm.
and Dr. Sala, and some of these others, who have put a lot of this information out so that people could look at it. And so anyway, on Veterans Day, Preston James thought that it was necessary to open this up a bit to people, because, again, it's not just a political problem,
Mm.
but the problem is being promoted behind the scenes
Mm.
by some of these Draco reptilian types.
So this
And
has to be uh, a particular bloodline that can be possessed by these entities. Is that what you're saying? And that's why they seem.
I don't know that so much,
Okay. That's what
but
I
my
heard.
first experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had years ago, probably around, I don't know, 2000, 2001, I had made an acquaintance uh,
Mm.
with a lady, and she was actually the financial minister
Mm.
for the Knights of Malta. Now, a lot of people got bad words to say about Knights of Malta and all that kind of stuff, but I knew her personally, on a personal basis level.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked to me that way. I mean, she wasn't highfalutin or anything,
Okay.
but she'd tell me candidly about different things, and she told me
Mm.
that she personally had seen the Queen of England shapeshift into a reptilian.
We've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like I say, you see all this stuff on the internet, and people are making, stories about this and telling about, but she told me right to my face that she had personally seen that. Now, I didn't take her for, making up a story about it.
Mm,
And so when Preston James comes out with some of this information, I'm pretty sure that the audience, that reads and pays attention to veterans today, perhaps it was a bit shocking for some of them.
mm,
But
right.
I'm here to tell you that it's a real problem. It's a real problem. And in other places and other times in my past history, I've had to deal with those things, you know, as a space warrior, put it that way. Anyway, this article is quite long. I think it's about 11 pages long,
Mhm,
and what Preston had done, he had emboldened certain things, and then the letters. I mean, the words that are in normal smaller letters, is commentary. But anyway, when you go through the article, he has emboldened
mhm,
certain items because he wanted to give emphasis to those. And the first thing you see right here,
mhm,
world Zionists have labeled Khazarian imposters as the real descendants of Abraham in order to form a tyrannical racial delusion and criminal conspiracy against those they wrongly believe are American Goyim. Now, that word Goyim, you can go look up. It refers to anybody who's not what they claim to be an Israeli or a Jew. And so it's
well,
the
we need to
Jew.
make that distinction, though.
Yeah,
Which
it's
Jew we're
the
talking
Jews and the
about?
Goyim. That's the only
Yeah,
way they look at the whole world.
but the Khazarian Jews, not the
Yeah,
not the you know
yeah, the Ashkenazi.
right.
See, if you break it down, that 90-10 split I talked about is 90% Ashkenazi and 10% Sephardic.
Mhm,
And there's variations all in between all that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an expert on the subject. Look at
right.
Preston's pointing out here. It's a racial delusion. It's simply not true.
Hmm,
And that's why I say we'd spent all that time on the one of the other interviews where we had gone back on the history of the Khazarians and,
right.
and how they, what they had developed into, brought them right down to our modern time. It's what Kessler called the 13th tribe,
Right. Right.
but they're not
Right.
a tribe. They're not a tribe of Israel.
Mm.
And
Where'd they
when
come from then? Where'd they come from?
I'm going to show you that just in a little while.
Okay.
Anyway, he said world Zionists have worked hard to create a sinister racial delusion in Khazarian Judaic converts
Mm,
to foster the attack, asset stripping, tyrannizing, capture, and eventual mass eradication
mm,
of the real ancient Abrahamic bloodlines, which actually have scattered, disseminated, and diffused over most of the planet. Now we're going to go into that a little bit when we show the division between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel, but we'll have to go back into our history here in just a little while to show that. So anyway, Preston puts a note here because he knows what's going to happen in the minds with the cognitive dissonance that he's fixing to portray on veterans today.
and as a licensed psychologist, he would know. He would be
Yeah.
preparing people.
He said this has been a difficult article to write.
Mm,
And unless folks are up to speed on the information contained in earlier articles about secret space war, they will likely find it incomprehensible, incredulous, and a complete waste of time. It's no use arguing against the shadow. Unless you have a working knowledge of secret space war issues, please stop reading this article and don't waste your valuable time.
very good. Fair enough. So,
Now, that's a real good caveat to put on the first of this article.
yeah.
Like I say, you've had Randy on your program several times, and,
Yep.
and you've talked to, Sergeant Dan Bolin, Miles Johnson, and all those different ones that
Mhm,
have this kind of knowledge.
right.
And people can go on the internet and listen. I mean, I've heard a lot of criticism of Corey Good,
Hmm.
uh, and certainly Dr. Sala has made a monumental effort to expose these things.
Right.
And so, to some of us who have been exposed over the years to that information, this caveat don't apply to us. But what Preston was trying to warn some of his readers in Veterans Today was they need a background to make sense out of what he's fixing to put out here. Anyway, we can go through just a little bit of this. I don't want to take a whole lot of time. I'll send this article to you, and you can repost it. I'm sure Preston will be happy for you to do that. Anyway, unbeknownst to most, there has been a secret war being waged against American Goyim by grotesquely evil cosmic alien force centuries old and known only to top insiders as the Dracos, or the great serpents of old, or the fallen ones. Now, you can go on James Gilliland's information.
Hmm.
He exposes all this. So this is fairly well known in a certain genre of researchers.
Right.
But, Preston is just trying to put a caveat out. If you don't have that information already, stop reading. Go and get the information and then come back and read this.
Yeah.
That's what he's trying to tell people, because he's laying it out. He's laying it out just as plain and simple as can be.
Everybody has to do this at their own pace, there's no right or wrong. It's just, if you're not ready for it, wait
Stay
until,
away from it.
yeah, because
Yeah, and that's he's fair in giving that caveat.
absolutely.
Anyway, he says says they are experts at convincing the public that black is white and white is black, good is evil and evil is good. And the worst
Absolutely.
part is they have apparently gained control of most of the earth's riches by hijacking most of the monetary production and distribution systems under the power of the Draco and ancient Babylon money magic. Now, you go back, folks, go back and review some of the recent interviews we did about money.
Hmm.
And you can go all the way back to that one. I don't know if you got it back up yet, but the one we did about the plan of the experts and everything. We put out massive amounts of information
Yes, we
about this,
have.
folks.
No, we're getting there though. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
What we
No,
need.
I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying,
No.
when people get a chance to go and see all those things, go back and review those things.
Well,
Come up to speed.
what I'm trying to say is what we need to help get the archive up is financial donations so that we can
Yeah.
buy more bandwidth, because now I have to restore 200 videos that, it takes a lot of time to upload all these videos and a lot of bandwidth that's not affordable. So, and this is our studio, so it's nothing,
Yeah, I know.
we're not, we're grassroots here, so we
Yeah,
get,
I'm just sitting here
and
in
I
the
do
front room.
appreciate people. Yeah, and I do appreciate people who do make a contribution, because we're all in this together, so we all do what we can. We all do what
Yeah,
we can.
this is the opportunity for those that listen to this to be a part of the solution.
Exactly.
If it's $10, if it's 15, or if it's 20, put your
Yeah.
energy into this.
Yeah.
We're putting our energy into it. You need to put your energy into it too for a successful completion. We're just doing our
Yeah.
part. We're not saving the world,
Nope.
but
But you
we
know what?
save the world
Person
one
at a
piece
time.
at a time.
And you know what? It's synchronicity, Winston, that brought us together. Nobody told us to go do this and start doing, and
No.
so the fact that, it was the right thing, the right time, the right place, the synchronicity, and that's what brings us all together, is synchronicity. So, what resonates with you. And we've been working for 3 years, Goldfish Report, to establish ourselves. We've gone through some changes and transitions, but everybody does, and I'm sure we'll go through some more too. But yeah, Goldfish Report has talked about this. We've interviewed many people who have had opinions. I think probably the one who spoke, as you had correctly mentioned, the one who spoke the most about the Dracos was Randy Kramer.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I know Randy. I've had him here in the front room telling me his
Yeah.
stories. I've been at his place, and he tells me these stories. Some of which he don't tell because they're so fantastic and people probably wouldn't believe it.
Hmm.
He told me all about that.
Hmm.
and what battles and stuff he was involved in, and what the outcomes were, and the soldiers that was lost. And it was a war. It was a war. Anyway, this I wanted to, the Dracos are reputed to be able to induce mass human suffering and fast kill and slow kill death. And it says the short-term goal of the Dracos has always been to create as much human suffering and painful mass death as possible. Now, the reason why they do that is that when negative energy is created through fear
Mm-hmm.
and these other elements and so forth, there's something that, I think somebody put the term on it, loosh.
Mm-hmm.
It's actual energy that these parties feed on. It's their food. And so when you go into fear, you're creating this energy, this loosh, and so you're feeding them.
Right. And according to the movie Avatar, it gave the example how
Yep.
they could, that's why, since they are masters of deception, they do resist in the lower astral, lower fourth dimension. So,
Yeah. They
according
do.
to the research, so that's the reason why they appear human, because they look for a certain blood type that they can actually, that blood type is apparently the DNA that allows them to inhabit
Yeah.
their frequency, their soul, to inhabit that entity. So these people never really died in history, like Queen,
Yeah.
uh, Victoria and all that. It's Queen Elizabeth. So, they just recycle the body. And Princess Diana even revealed, David Icke did in the book, The Biggest Secret or The Great Secret or whatever, something like that, was that they just take a piece of human flesh and with a particular frequency of life, they know how to manipulate and create another human body. It's all possible, folks. And they're
Yeah.
doing
It
this
is.
all to manipulate us. And what the comment that I wanted to make was that we have to realize that there's a reason. Maybe you know something more about this, Winston, but there's a reason why the Antarctic is off limits to everybody. Why every country in the world signed a treaty to never go there and explore there, and yet on our continent, on this, on the rest of the world, there's wars and all kinds of misery, and that's because my hypothesis is that that's where they live. I mean, General Byrd flew past that Great Wall of the Antarctic, which he circumnavigated, and Captain Cook circumnavigated 60,000 miles. So we know that there is a very large circumference ice wall around, that there's more of a plain that exists. And there were lands, and there's video of this, of Admiral Byrd's trip in his flight, where there were lands beyond the South
Yeah.
Pole. He said this in an interview. There were lands beyond the South Pole. So that's probably where they live. So we know that recently they've been talking about John Kerry, and all these other uh, politicians going down to Antarctica, and they're revealing that there's hidden craft down there, and that they were frozen, or in stasis. Some of these fallen entities, fallen angels, whatever. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the hypothesis I came up with, was that okay? That's who really is beyond the South Pole, and why every country in the world has agreed to this one thing, because all those leaders and have that DNA, and all those leaders are inhabited by these entities. No kidding. How perfect that works out. So
Yeah.
that's why there's war between them, and it's all just orchestrated. It's all
To
organized so that
create
they can
loosh.
create the loosh. Exactly. So that's how we've been manipulated. That's how we're being used, folks. And so it's just something to think about and do your own research on. But when you look at the footage of Admiral Byrd's expeditions and his subsequent interviews, you have to come to this conclusion, because why else? Why else would that be on Earth, off limits, and that every other country in the world, has signed a treaty not to go and develop and to explore? Okay, so there's a reason for it. It's because they're the ones, those people who sign those treaties are in fact Dracos themselves in the human
Yep.
body. Okay, so that's how they control it. It's all controlled. We are so controlled, folks. You really have no idea until you start looking into it and doing your own research. But this lays it out very, very good. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I wanted to comment too that one of the things about solutions in commerce. I mean, we get into technology, all the way from traffic tickets to mortgages to whatever.
Mhm.
But by learning the technology, developing it, and using it, people become self-empowered so that they don't go into fear. Because if you don't go into fear, you're not feeding the Dracos.
Right.
And so, people, you talk to people, well, I've never been to court before, and I'm afraid to go, and this, that, and the other.
Of course.
So we try to educate them,
Hmm.
of how to proceed, how to do things, so that you don't uh, emote fear, because they're feeding on that. And
Yeah.
so
And
we need to stop that. And so, certainly, the people who have taken up with the technology and so forth that we've shown over the years with solutions in commerce, we're taking them out of fear. We're preventing, a food supply to the Dracos. And so that's one of the, side issues of what we do at Solutions in Commerce or others. We're trying to take people out of the fear mode for their own immediate benefit, but also in the long run to stop creating this luge that these entities are feeding on.
right.
We're not blowing smoke at people about this. This is real, and that's what Preston James is trying to portray here.
Right. They can't
We're
feed on us if I mean, look what this says here. I mean, this is exactly what's happening today, right? They do this by the use of high-tech mass mind control, which we know we can verify because there was recently a FOIA request that included, apparently accidentally, which I don't really think was accidental, but it was this mind control program, which we all even know about, the MK Ultra programs, which were admitted in a Senate hearing in 1977. But here, Psi Power, administration of black magic spells. Folks, this is real stuff.
That
Induced
is
manufactured long-term illnesses through aerosol spraying, folks.
chemtrails.
Didn't we just recently have a doctor state that there is chemtrail lung? That's an official diagnosis. So they're accomplishing this. So the reason why we're not allowed to go and they want us to believe certain things about our world is so that we don't ask questions. Because if we have 7 billion people asking questions and demanding answers why we can't go to Antarctica or beyond, then they don't want that. So they need to control how we believe our world to be. So they've succeeded at doing that because
Yeah.
you can't ask questions. The minute you ask questions, you're ridiculed instead of, you're trying to do a real academic, you're trying to really, there used to be something called the scientific method, but the researchers don't seem to use that any longer. Science doesn't seem to use that any longer because, you have to have, you only inquire based on actual observations of a phenomena of some kind. And that's how you start your research. So, but if you do
Yeah.
your research, you will see it's right in front of our face. And apparently, Winston, one of the things that there's been a lot of research we've done on Goldfish Report on this topic, is that it's right, apparently with this black magic, you have to tell them what you're going to do before you do it. So apparently this is right out in the open, but for some reason we don't see it.
Well, first off, that's a false way to do. Matter of fact, I was talking to James about this the other day. We were discussing this very thing, and somebody commented, they're telling us before they do it with movies and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I say, that is not the way you give notice.
Oh, it's not. Absolutely.
That is not the way you do it, and they cannot use that excuse to say we told you so. No,
Right.
that's not the way you give notice. Now, and with our technology and solutions and we show you how to give notice,
Right.
proper notice.
Yes.
But anyway, let's not spend a whole lot of time on this article. I'll send it to you, and the
Okay.
people that want to go over that, then they can uh, spend some time with it. I mean, read the caveat first and decide whether or not you want to read the rest of the article or not.
Mhm.
But to some of us that have been around this stuff for a long time, you don't need to tell us any kind of caveat. We know it already. But anyway, let's get, because you'd asked some questions, I want to get into a little bit of history here. What I've done, I've kind of gone back and done a timeline, uh, so that people could see a timeline, you know, of how some of these things have come to us. So let's look at this one here. Is that up there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, these are time estimates
Mm-hmm.
based upon, the historical record that we have. Are they altogether accurate? Well, I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
Mm-hmm.
But at least this timeline here establishes a certain history that people should be aware of to draw conclusions about what they see happening here in 2018. So we had talked in the past, quite a bit about, the story of Adam and Eve and all those kind of things. And so this this timeline here starts out with Adam, and they say that the story about Adam and the coming out of the garden and all that kind of stuff happened about 4,000. It started about 4,000 BC, or before the Common Era, or however you like to say it. Now Adam lived to be about 930 years old, and then he quote unquote died. Now, he didn't die; he just went back to where he came from. But anyway, he left the planet around 3070 BC. Now, I have commented in the past that because, these people like Adam and Noah and some of these others lived to be so old, that obviously they weren't on the surface when these stories started. Because people on the inside lived, a lot of them typically lived to be 1,000 years old. And so the indications are that the Adam and Eve Garden of Eden story and so forth happened inside the hollow earth. And I have more reasons to believe that. I think I had mentioned this one friend who had flown in there twice, and he was sponsored by Howard Hughes. We talked about Howard Hughes last
Yes.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Howard Hughes was getting old and he wanted to live longer. And so on the second trip, they went in there to try to find the tree of life. If you recall in the Genesis and in the stories and so forth, in the Garden of Eden, there was a tree called the tree of life. And if you ate it, you could live forever. And so Howard Hughes sent this expedition inside to try to locate the tree of life. That's what they were doing, because they knew it was in there. Howard Hughes knew it was in there. And so he sent an expedition in to try to find it. And obviously they weren't successful because Howard Hughes, well, actually they beat him. Howard Hughes didn't die of natural causes, just like Mo Dalitz. But they didn't shoot him. They beat him to death. Physically beat him to death. That's how Howard Hughes died. He was on a plane coming back out of South America somewhere, headed back to the States. And they were trying to get him to give up certain things, which he wouldn't do, so he simply beat him to death. Anyway, I don't want to get into Howard Hughes stories. Like I said the other day, I could tell those stories for 2 hours steady and not draw a long breath. Anyway, so we got Adam. Let's say that story starts about 4,000 BC, which gives some indications about this character known as Jesus, because it said of him that he would come in the meridian of time. And so after Adam, about 4,000 years later, here comes this Jesus onto the planet. Now, if we consider that's the middle of time, then we got another 4,000 years before this whole thing, is over with. And so since Jesus, we've had, approximately 2,000 years. So that gives us, 6,000 in total. So the next 1,000 years is what the Christian concept is of a millennium. and then the next 1,000 years, which would complete 8,000 years. So just do the math and think about the implications of these years and so forth. And I'll send this article to you. You don't need to copy it down if you don't want to. I'll send you all this stuff. Anyway, then we get this next character whose name was Noah. And apparently he was born, and I don't know exactly, where Noah came from, who his parentage was. I don't know. Anyway, apparently he was born somewhere around 2940 BC. And he lived to be 950 years old. And he died in 1890 BC. Now, here's where the kicker comes in. Here's where the problems come in. And that is Noah had 3 sons. It was Japheth and Shem and Ham. Now, Japheth is the one that the KHAZARIANs descended from. These KHAZARIANs that we're talking about here, they're not Shemites. They're not Semites. They're Japhethites. And so they run around all this anti-Semitic. Jiminy Christmas, folks.
Yeah.
Just go and learn just a little bit of history. See all these lies and subterfuge. Anyway, Shem apparently was born somewhere around 2480 BC, and he lived to about 1830 BC. Now, Abraham was a descendant of Shem. And Abraham was born somewhere around 2000 BC. How long he lived, I don't know exactly, but because he was on the surface. If you look at these things, you got Adam, you got Noah, you got Shem, whose life is getting shorter. You get down to Abraham, and typically in the days of Abraham, the people lived to be about 150 or 175 years old. So I don't know exactly when Abraham died, but I would suspect he was probably, lived to be like 175 or something like that, because, he didn't have Isaac until he was about 100 years old, for crying out loud. With Sarah. You remember Sarah, was complaining, that she was an old woman. She was over 90 years old when she had Isaac. Over 90. I'm not really sure how pleasant an experience that was for her, being a 90-year-old, mother, but that's what happened. These are the histories that we have. So anyway, Abraham lived, during that time, but it's interesting to note that Abraham and Noah were still alive at the same time. The life of Noah overlapped the birth of Abraham. Did they know each other? I don't know. They could have, though, because of the dates of death and birth. So certainly Abraham was alive during the times of Shem and of Noah. And they may have had some things to do together. I don't know, but it's possible. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, so Abraham had Isaac around 1900 BC, and then Isaac had Jacob around 1860 BC, and then the 12 sons of Jacob, who was renamed Israel. He had those 12 sons, starting somewhere around, let's say, 1800 BC and then onward. Now we get into some of the other characters, because I'm bringing up some of these particular names because of the implications for the future. And so Jacob Israel had the 12 sons, and then Joseph, who was one of the sons, actually he was the oldest son of the favored wife, Rachel. You can read that story in the Old Testament. I don't need to go over it. I mean, everybody should have paid attention in Sunday school. I don't need to go back over all that. Anyway, so Joseph had Manasseh and Ephraim around 1750 BC, and then the Israelites apparently went into Egypt. You know the story about Joseph and the many colored coats and all that stuff. Anyway, so apparently they went into Egypt somewhere around 1650 BC. Now, Moses comes on the scene about 1375 BC. So that's what, 300 some odd years gone in. So that's why we say that the Israelites were ethnic Egyptians. They lived in Egypt, over 300 years. And so did they adopt the customs and all those kind of things of the Egyptians? Well, obviously they did. And then they got into financial bondage. And so when Moses came to deliver them with the Exodus and all those kind of things, he was simply taking them, just like Solutions in Commerce, he was taking them out of financial bondage. That's what he was doing. So anyway, the Exodus, I don't know, somewhere around, 1310 BC. And then you get into, the history of the people with, Joshua and ruled by the judges around 1280 BC. Then Samuel the prophet came along about 1150 BC. And then we had the story about Saul, and the Israelites were demanding so they could be like all the other people around them. They wanted a king. They didn't want to be ruled by judges. Mm-hmm. You remember in our analysis that we had done of the Maintenon record,
yes,
how some of those societies had chosen judges to govern them, and they were chosen by the matriarchy, by the grandmothers and the mothers. Right. Remember that story?
Yes.
Well, that's a really good program. But anyway, the Israelites, I guess, they wanted to be like everybody around them, so they wanted to get rid of ruled by judges, and they wanted a king. And Saul was really upset Samuel was really upset about that. And finally, the Lord told him, said, look, he says, they haven't rejected you. He says, God told him, he says, they have rejected me. And so anyway, then you have the story about Saul, who really, as far as I think Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. So he really couldn't be, the king of Judah. And so then they finally got, then finally David came on the scene. And so King David was somewhere around 1010 BC, around that period of time. And then they had the split. There were two kingdoms that decided to split apart as far as their, arrangements and so forth. And so 10 of the tribes became known as the Kingdom of Israel. And then the other two tribes, which was Judah and basically Benjamin, they had a few Levites. First off, there was a certain amount of, people from all different kind of tribes, here, there, and the other. But anyway, the Kingdom of Judah was comprised basically of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. And apparently the split happened somewhere around 910 BC. And then because of the wars and so forth, the Kingdom of Israel was taken into captivity by the Assyrians. And then the Kingdom of Judah, sometime around 587 BC, were taken by the Babylonians into captivity. Now, there's some interesting things. Let me just say that as a result of the Babylonian captivity, that's the first time we hear the word Jew being used,
Mhm.
because those of the tribe of Judah who had intermarried with the Babylonians became known as Jews.
Hmm.
Now, the kingdom of Israel that was taken into Assyria, eventually they escaped. I mean, God did miracles for them and stuff, and so they escaped and went into the lands northward. And they did, I mean, Preston James in his article talks a little bit about the dispersion of the 10 tribes, through Europe and different places like that. But I'm going to suggest, and I believe it's true, that the main body of the kingdom of Israel actually went back inside the hollow earth where they are today as a body of people.
Interesting. Okay.
And there's certain prophecies and so forth about the return of the lost tribes of Israel. They'll come out of the north, it says. It said God would cast up a highway from the great deep, and it says the ice will flow down at their presence. So when they come out of the northern opening, whatever arrangements made for them to get back down into their own lands, I mean, they'll have to, melt the ice or whatever, so they get past that ice barrier to get back down into the lands which was given to them according to the ancient traditions, by God. So
Mhm.
they have certain land designations in the land that we would call basically Palestine,
Mhm.
and the lands that are presently occupied by the Israelis, as they call them, will be taken back away from them. It will be re-inhabited by the original uh, natives to that land. So, like I say, there's quite a bit of history, and in our modern times when there's so much confusion going on, about all these elements, it's all false history. It's a false history,
Yeah.
and that's
So I
what
am.
Preston James is trying to point out. Because of the influence of these Dracos and so forth, we have this false history in front of us.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted, for people's, you can go do research on this. These are just the numbers I found, as I researched some of these things. You can go research, and maybe you can be more accurate than I've been. I don't know, but I'm just trying to give you that chronology to get us down to our present time, because of the false
Mhm.
history
Mhm.
is
Right.
being portrayed. And Preston gives the reason why that false history was put out.
Mhm.
Now, I think this, should be fairly self-evident to people. So anyway, like I say, when we've done a lot of our reports, I have spent a great deal of time on history, because when you get down to our modern times, we're not studying history in our schools,
Mhm.
and the history we have is false. I mean, when I was in high school, we had, history. When I got into college, we had to take so much history. It was all pure BS. It
Mhm.
wasn't true. It was a history that's been made up to fit a certain criteria.
A
And the
certain view of the
criteria is to
world.
make
Yeah.
people stupid so they don't know the history.
Right, and not question it. That's the whole
And I
key.
question
Yeah, exactly. It's to keep them from questioning it.
it. Yeah, see that's technically what got me kicked out of the Mormon church. Was I went back into history and said, well, this is the way that it was when it all started. Why are we doing something different today? And they said, well, if you can't accept the modern version, hit the road. That's exactly what happened.
Jeez. Okay. Interesting.
And, I said, well, okay, I mean, I would rather have truth than the falsehood. And if
Sure.
I have to believe it and accept the falsehood in order to be a member of some organization, then I just won't be a member of it. That's
Yeah,
all. And
exactly.
so, we run into these same things everywhere we go, if not in our churches, but in our political organizations.
Mhm.
I remember that it's been about, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. there was a movie put out about the history of Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party all the way back. It was shocking. You see that movie? I forgot the name of it now. It wasn't a popular movie, trust me.
That's
It was
true.
not a popular movie. But they went into the Saul Alinsky crap, and how that developed. And then they went back in history and showed how the Democrats had acted, and Andrew Jackson and all the way back through slavery and the Democrats and all the things they had done.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a pretty story. It was not, but it appeared to be an accurate history of what had gone on in some of the earliest times. So again, history is ever so important to understand, or you can't make heads or tails out of what out of what's going on now, and you will be misled.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is the thing that got my hackles up this week. I was listening to a report on, and I won't name names. I don't need to, but I was listening to a report by one of the really popular commentators on about things. And he was going on and on about he was a Christian and he was professing his faith, which I got no problem with.
Mm-hmm.
And he had accepted Jesus as his savior, and then he goes into this business about Israel. Well, that's an oxymoron. He twisted in his thinking. Either that or he has an agenda.
I think it's more he has an agenda, and I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
And
Now
it's known that
yeah.
his colleagues are funded by the Mossad, the
Yeah.
Jewish. Yeah.
Now,
So
let me tell you, people out there, just flat out, Jesus was not a Christian. The Christians simply glommed onto Jesus and used him for all they're worth. Where did Christianity come from? It came from Constantine, the Roman emperor.
right.
About, what is it, 347 AD. That's where Christianity came from. There was no such thing as a Christian church or something like that during the times of Jesus or the apostles.
Well, he
And
was
so when
Jewish.
Christianity was created by Constantine, the Roman emperor, it evolved from that. And the idea that Jesus was a Christian is simply not true. Now, the Christians accept him as their, God, as their Savior and Redeemer and stuff, which I have no problem with. But to say that Jesus himself is bound by Christianity is simply not true. He's not bound by the Christians.
Mm.
I mean, even if you go into the Muslim world, they consider Jesus to be a prophet, and he was. But what happens all the time with some of these major religions, they take up some prominent light bearer, if I can use that, like Jesus or Mohammed or Buddha or whoever, and then they take them and they put them in a box, and they say, well, this is what this is, and instead of allowing that entity
Mm-hmm.
to spread the light and knowledge that they could,
Mm.
they capture them, they put them in jail, they put them in a box, and that's what the Christians have done. That's what the Muslims have done.
Mm.
They all do the same thing. They all do that. It's just not right. So anyway, not to get on my soapbox again, about some of those things. I wanted to, let's see. All right, let me screen share this one other. I'll send you all these articles and everything.
Sure. Okay.
I wanted to give just a little bit more history on some of this.
Well, it does put things into context and perspective because when you
Yeah,
think about, when you think about the uh, level of control in our society, uh, and you have to look at history because you won't know who's responsible for it if you don't know the history.
yeah,
It's important to know these things. Okay.
yeah. This article here, I mean, this is something I found on the internet. It's all over the place. Crying out loud, you can go find all these things
Hmm.
if you're interested to know about them. I mean, way back when I first started studying all this stuff, it was in books. You had to go to the library, you get a book and read it. But now it's just all over the internet.
Yeah.
It's really easy to find stuff. Anyway, again, this is talking about the lost 10 tribes, what had happened to them, being taken captive by the Assyrians, and they were trying to figure out, uh, how many people, what numbers of people were actually affected by some of these things. Anyway, they were in northwestern Mesopotamia toward the upper reaches of the Tigris and the Euphrates River. And I think there's a map here so you can get a context. Yeah, here's a map. The kind of, so for some of this stuff. So they start out down here in Palestine area, Canaan as they call it. Then they get captured and they take them up here into this one town called Habar, and then they go over here, and then they go over to here, and so forth. Now, eventually, what happened is, you look at this map, they were able to escape across the Euphrates, and then they start this northern migration. Now, it is true that we have many elements of the 10 tribes dispersed among basically your Northern European people. It's not uncommon. I mean, we find it all the time. But my contention is, which I believe, like I say, this is my belief. You can take it for what you want. That as a body, the 10 tribes actually migrated back to where they had originated from, back inside the hollow earth.
Okay.
And that at some point that they'll re-emerge to fulfill the prophecies, so forth have been made. So anyway, that's a little map so you kind of get a context, what we're talking about here when we talk about some of these things. Anyway, so they haul them up into Mesopotamia, up reaches of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers there, await the time of their escape. Today, those areas are associated with eastern Syria, northern Iraq, northwestern Iran, and the American region, the Armenian region of eastern Turkey. So on today's map, these would be the names of the places that we're talking about, as far as the Assyrians and all that kind of stuff. So eventually, some of the displaced Israelis escaped through captivity, to fill these prophecies. It says how this portion escaped and when are not particularly known, but perhaps the fall of Assyria afforded the captives the opportunities to escape. In the period between 614 and 610 BC, the armies of the Medes, you can read all that history. But anyway, what happened? Now, again, this author here goes back and quotes some of the things out of the Book of Mormon, because the Book of Mormon people were descendants, not of Judah, but they were actually descendants of Manasseh, who was one of the sons of Joseph. So the Book of Mormon people that migrated to South America about 600 BC, let's say, were actually from the tribe of Manasseh. Anyway, but the point I think that this author here is trying to put across is that over a period of time, because of lack of communication, the kingdom of Israel, which was the 10 tribes, and the kingdom of Judah lost contact with each other. And that's why the kingdom of Israel is referred to as the lost 10 tribes.
Okay.
So they have been lost as an identity. And like I say, my personal opinion is that there is a body of those who actually live inside the hollow earth. Anyway, you can, I'll send you this article and you can look at it. So you can kind of trace a little bit of this, as you try to figure out where all this happened at. Now, let me make this comment so that people will not be confused, because Israel is referred to as a chosen people. All right. Now let me ask you the question: chosen to do what? In other words, we have a tendency to use adjectives like chosen people. In the idea, well, they're some kind of highfalutin royalty, blah blah blah. No, we don't say that. Now, if these Israelites are a chosen people,
Mm.
they were chosen to be the servants. Now, Jesus taught this. He said, you have to be the servants of all people. And so Jesus didn't give the idea that these Israelites were some kind of highfalutin kind of deal going on. Was going to sit on thrones and and be all that kind of stuff. No, he expected those who were chosen through their lineage as Israelites to be like he was, to go below all things, to be the servants of the people, to assist in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so all this, all this business, you go across Europe, you talk about all these kings and queens and royal people and all that kind of thing. That's not Israelitish doctrine, not at all. The only time that we find the kings and queens who were the servants of the people were the Fisher kings, or what we call the Merovingian dynasty, who were the direct descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Now, they were there to serve the people and not to hold it over them because of their lineage. Now, if you look at all these people running around here claiming to be, the chosen ones of God, modern Jewry, the Israelis,
Mm-hmm.
and all these Christians keep pumping them up because the Christians haven't even bothered to take the time to study to find out the true nature of what's going on. And they keep pumping them up. God's chosen people. Okay, again,
Chosen for
the
what?
word chosen is an adjective.
Mm-hmm.
It modifies the word people.
Mm-hmm.
Chosen people. Chosen to do what? To go and bomb the hell out of everybody across the planet?
Yeah.
To put bombs, and you go back and study. Hey, go back and study, the Balfour Agreement and what happened, all that kind of stuff. Go study the life history of Menachem Begin, Golda Meir,
Mm.
and then you determine, would you like to have those people living next door to you? They're terrorists. Begin was firebombing London, for crying out loud. He was a terrorist. And then, then through all the stuff that went on, then he got to be the, main guy or prime minister or whatever of what they call Israel. Every time I keep hearing people refer to that group as Israel, it just turns my stomach. The word Israel means the covenant people of God. And I in my wildest imagination, I can't imagine if God chose somebody, he wouldn't send them to be terrorists and be
Yeah.
setting off fire bombs in London.
Exactly.
Now, pardon my expression, what kind of horse shit is that? And Christians keep buying into it left and right. Get off it. It's not true. Anyway, let me be more pleasant. Anyway, I'll
Winston's
send
getting
you
all
this link.
riled up.
Well, I do get all riled up because, again, what good can come from a false history?
Nothing
What
at
good
all.
can come from a false concept?
Mm-hmm.
And people come up with these false ideas and false concepts, and somehow in their wildest imagination they attributed it to God. It's not true. It simply is not true. Anyway, like I say, this article, I'll send it to you. It was obviously written by what we would call a Mormon author, because he brings in elements
Mhm.
from Book of Mormon.
Mhm.
Again, Book of Mormon people were Israelites. That's what they were. They were from the tribe of Manasseh. They did have some mixture of some other tribes, in amongst them and so forth. But for the most part, the main character in that storyline there, he was from the tribe of Manasseh, not Ephraim, Manasseh. And so that, I mean, years and years ago, I mean, when I was a young person, I was interested in all those things. So I did, extensive study of all those things. And so later on in my life, like right to this very present time, when I see all this craziness going on, it turns my stomach. It just literally turns my stomach. Now, I want to show you a picture, and I want to tell a story.
Okay.
It's something actually I was personally involved in. And okay, you see that?
Yes.
I'll make it bigger so you can see. Can you see the details on that?
Mhm.
That's kind of called the British coat of arms. I don't know what to call it,
Yeah.
but you see two animals. Well, you actually see three.
Agree. Mhm.
But on the left in this picture, it's a lion.
Right.
Now, the lion is the symbol for Judah, the kingdom of Judah. And on the right, you see a unicorn, which is improper. The kingdom of Israel, typified by Ephraim, is actually a bull. And they, for whatever their imaginations got into them, they decided, well, let's take the bull out of the picture and let's put a unicorn in there. But if you look carefully at the unicorn or the kingdom of Israel, you'll notice it has a chain around the neck. And I want to tell this story.
Okay.
Okay, so if you can visualize that picture, I can take it down. But I wanted to show this picture because every time you see this particular depiction, emblem, or whatever motif, or
Mm.
it's put a chain around the neck of the kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes kingdom. Okay, so it's got a chain around its neck. So I'll tell this. So now I'll tell this story.
Okay. I don't want
And
to
that
rush or
was
anything, but
back in, I think.
sorry, but it's just I think our internet's a little unstable. We've had nothing but storms here today, and so the internet, the recording folks might be a little bit, uh, you know, fading in and out a little bit because we've had some pretty bad weather, and the internet, the bandwidth is actually not as good as it used to be. But so apologize, Winston.
Well, we do the best we can,
Apologize.
but I think people can get the idea.
Yeah.
And that was, when I had been over in London in 2009 and had done that seminar over there, and we'd gone up to the observatory, and looked down the timeline, or the what's called Greenwich mean. Anyway, you run right down through the city of London. And so
Yeah.
it was obvious to me that the city of London was controlling the start and stop of commerce. And so I'm scratching my head, about that, thinking about it. So eventually, in around 2011,
Oh, the Meridian. Yeah.
the prime meridian, whatever they call it. Anyway, it's in a brass plate right in the ground. You can stand 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other.
Yeah.
You know. And so anyway, I looking down that line and I saw it ran right straight through the city of London, which signified to me that the city of London was in control of the start and stop of commerce. That's what it signified to me. So I thought about that for a long time, and then eventually, as I became more involved with this shaman, I had asked her, can you move that? And she said she could. And so
Hmm.
she took and moved the prime meridian over to the Dragon Rose line. I think I've told this story before. I think people
Yes, you
might
have.
remember
Hmm.
it. And then she anchored it down so they couldn't move it back. And that caused a great deal of mayhem. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
City of London was all up, just running around like cats on a hot tin roof. Same effect in the Vatican, because they knew it when we did it. It was an energetic thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as she had mentioned to me, when she does something on the ether, she said it usually takes 3 days for it to materialize
Mm-hmm.
in the physical world. But she told me that very next day. She said if I hadn't been watching it, I wouldn't have noticed it, because she wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. But she said from about 8 o'clock in the this is in England. She said from about 8 o'clock in the morning to about 3:30 in the afternoon, she said time stood still.
Hmm. Interesting.
What was happening was that line was moving over to the Dragon Rose line, that timeline.
Right.
And so that was, inadvertently or whatever, by inspiration, whatever, we did that in the fall of 2011 because of the events which would transpire in 2012
Mm-hmm.
at the equinox, when the timelines were fixed. Let me put it that way. So we had a lot of problems with timelines. You remember the Philadelphia experiment and them idiots, knocking holes in the time continuum, all kinds of screwy things that have been going on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 2012 and at the equinox, it wasn't the end of the Mayan calendar, but it was a period of alignment when the timelines were fixed so that we could proceed on with what had been anticipated and planned for. And so what we had done in November of 2011 to get that prime meridian, back onto a natural ley line, it facilitated what was done in 2012. I'll just put it that way. All right, so that's the first portion of a 3-part story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after we had accomplished that, again, we're doing all this, with in connection to, uh, in concert with Saint Germain.
Okay.
And so, anyway, after we had gotten that,
Go ahead.
yeah, we just took a little pause there. My voice is getting a little bit weak, so I got me another cough drop here. It's got some zinc lozenge in it, so maybe that'll help it out a little bit. Like I say, I'm getting old. Things are wearing out, so I can't, have the, voice and stuff that I used to have. Anyway, going along with this, what we had done with moving that timeline, Jermaine, for some reason, there was a buoy out in the Thames River that he wanted something done with, and so this shaman asked me what ought to be done with that. I said, "Well, sink it." I mean, I didn't know what it was connected to. Jermaine gave that information out. He just wanted something done with it. And so she didn't know what to do with it. And so she asked me, I said, well, let's sink it. And so etherically, in order to do that, she had to actually take it out to sea where the water would be deep enough to have the effect. Now, so that was the second part of that operation. And I don't know why, that was requested or what the effect of it was. But then to go back to the emblem that I showed just a moment ago, in communication through this shaman to Germain, I asked, can I remove the chain from around the neck of that unicorn? In other words, can I take the chain that's binding the kingdom of Israel? Can I take that chain off? And Germain came back and said, no, it's not time yet. Now, what that proper time would be, I don't know. Will I be involved with that? Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But at that time in 2011, Jermaine did not want us to tamper with whatever chain, which is all symbolic, but he did not want us tampering with the chain around the neck of Ephraim / kingdom of Israel. He said that is something that will be done in the future. Now, symbolically, what does that mean? What does that mean energetically? I'm not quite sure I know the answer to that question. But it is something which will be done, and I would suppose that chain, well, again, you put a chain on something to hold it down. All right, so I would suppose, in my way of thinking, that in order for the 10 tribes of Israel to return from the north and go to the New Jerusalem, to the temple, I would suppose that would be the appropriate time to remove that chain from around the neck of the unicorn. That's what I think. Do you have any questions about that?
Well, is that also related to us moving our embassy there? That's part of the prophecy where the new temple will be. Uh, they won't create the new
No,
temple. I think they were already going to.
no. First off, let's talk about Jerusalem for a moment. Uh, during okay, there have been temples on that site for a long time. It's many have projected that area, which would include Egypt, because that's not it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Egypt, the pyramids, and all those kind of things. Anyway, many have considered that Jerusalem, at least that area, is in fact the navel of the earth, the thing that connects us back to Mother. You see, and so those pyramids were put in place. There were temples built on the site where that temple was. Now, during the times of Jesus, there was a temple there. The Romans had come in and destroyed Solomon's temple. It was gone, but they put another temple up there on that exact same spot. But it was put up by Herod, and Herod was not from the tribe of Judah. They call him a Herodian, but he was basically an Idumean. He was not a bloodline Judahite, and there was a lot of people in the area of Jerusalem at that time who were the same category, and they're the ones that went to Pilate to get Jesus crucified. The Judahites weren't involved in that. It was the Idumeans. It was the Herodians. It was that element of that society that was thirsting for the blood of Jesus. It wasn't the tribe of Judah doing that. Eventually, that temple got destroyed, and what's called the Wailing Wall today is a part of the temple of Herod. And so it's only natural that modern Jews would go to the Wailing Wall of King Herod, who himself was not from the tribe of Judah. Now, it is said, prophesied, that there would be a new temple built there. And of course, the Muslims don't want us there. The Jews don't want it there. But there will be another temple built there, which will, be basically an Israelite-ish temple. And then the temple at New Jerusalem will be built on the North American continent, as I have described, to fulfill the words in Isaiah. that the law would go forth from Jerusalem and the word of the Lord from the New Jerusalem. So those are two separate and distinct temples under the authority of Jesus when he comes back to rule as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So again, the Christians need to get their history, they need to get their doctrine, they need to get their concepts straightened out. Because all this business about, the what they call it, it's not Israel. It's Khazaria. It's not. The temple of Herod is not the temple of the Lord. It's the temple of Herod. The Wailing Wall is a part of the temple of Herod. It had nothing to do with King Solomon or any of the other ancient temples that have been on that particular site. It's just not. And so I see that was my problem when I was, talking about listening to some of these commentators. I just become disgusted and said, I can't listen to any more of this. It's causing me too much anxiety to listen to this. So I just had to turn it off.
Stress, definitely.
Yeah. And so anyway, that was what kind of got me stimulated today. And then, before we wrap up here, we got to get, done here pretty quick. I wanted to show one more article because I referred to some things in the past. So I wanted to show this one more thing here. Yeah, Cathalis character. Like I say, we have a lot of people. I know we have a lot of people that listen to these reports in Ireland and British Isles and so forth. So I had referred to this Cathalis character, but I never had given his lineage. Anyway, so here's a little article. I'll send, this information is all the internet. I mean, it's all over the place. You don't have to listen to me to get this information. Anyway, this Cathalis had lived in Greece, but it doesn't give his lineage. The lineage were they were Israelites. They were Israelites, and they had developed Greece and Athens and all those kind of places. Anyway, this story here, you can read it. Then it talks about Cathalis and all of them going into Egypt. A little bit of the reference to fighting for the Pharaoh, marrying the Pharaoh's daughter, and then so then it goes into the Exodus. When Pharaoh began to be unkind. I don't know. It's just a little bit more than unkind. Let me put it that way. But anyway, when Pharaoh began to be unkind to the children of Israel, terrible plagues fell. So Cathalis decided he wanted to leave. So he gathered a fleet of ships, and with his wife, who was the daughter of the Pharaoh, I think it wasn't Akhenaten, but it was somebody in that line. Anyway, his wife was in the royal Pharaoh dynasty, bloodline. Anyway, he took his wife and children, soldiers, servants, a great company of people. They went on board and sailed far away across the sea in search of another country. And after many adventures and so forth, they end up on the shores of Spain, and in particular in the area that we now call Portugal, because again, the etymology of the word Portugal is Portugathalis. And so in his honor, that's where that name comes from. Anyway, a little bit of a going on there with the Spanish. They finally come to terms. And eventually Cathalis, decides he's going to go on over to Ireland. And so this is a pretty good little article here. I'll send it to you and people can look at it and do a little bit of research, stuff like that. There's a lot of Israelite history in Ireland. A lot of the business about the tribe of Dan.
Mhm.
uh, goes along with that. And so, anyway, just another article. Folks will look at it and get a little bit of like I say. I didn't intend to go on so long,
Okay.
but so we can kind of cut it off unless you have some questions. But the thing that stimulated me again was I got all cranked up listening to that BS that people are putting on
Right.
the internet.
Right.
And please, if you're a Christian, don't get fooled by that.
Mm.
Don't get fooled by it. Too many have already.
Well, the problem is there's a lot of misinformation out there already, and it's hard to know. It's
Yeah,
hard to know if you're reading misinformation if you're not sure of the details. That's why it is helpful to have a kind of you know, these kind of points that you're making that people can check back with to make sure they're on the right
yeah.
track.
Uh-huh.
Because there's a lot of, as you said, you heard somebody talking about this and he didn't really know what he was talking about. But I think, like we said before, he had another agenda. There was a reason why. Because he's a very, very, very educated man. And,
Yeah.
you would think that he wouldn't make those kinds of mistakes. But
Well, it's the same thing with Trump. Surely to goodness he knows his history. Surely to goodness he knows this. Now, this moving the embassy over to Jerusalem, for political reasons, and then the Christians all just bubble up and say, "Oh, we're doing all these, fulfilling all these prophecies." Oh, nuts, nuts.
mm-hmm,
That's not true at all. And so, you've been warned. Don't get sucked into this.
mm-hmm.
It's not true.
Well,
Now, I
but you,
think people will also profit greatly by reading the article by Preston James. He brings
right,
in other elements
right.
that have had a great deal of influence on what we're experiencing today. And if you start to factor in all the different angles on this program here, then you'll have a much better perception. You'll have a much, much better perception. Now, I don't, again, we generalize with a lot of the things that we go into. For instance, we use terms like Israel, Jews, Judah, and whatever as general terms. But when you get down into individual people, then we're not prescribing against anybody. I mean, if you're a Native American, if you're a Jew, if you're a Danite, if you're an Ephraimite, if you're a whatever, as an individual, you know, we're trying people because of their lineage, because we've had many, many wonderful examples of people who happen to be born into a particular lineage that have not allowed that to rule their life. And I'm a perfect example of it. I was born into a hillbilly family, and I make a lot of light about it. I have a lot of fun with it and all that kind of stuff. But I am not bounded. I'm not bounded by being a traditional hillbilly. And so if somebody comes along, makes a funny story about a hillbilly, or even has criticism, I know they're not pointing at me particularly, but they're telling a generality about a group of people
Mhm.
that have their good points, and they have their bad points.
Well, but this is all part of the whole Draco-reptilian manipulation of
Yeah,
humanity because they've got us to fight each other. They don't have to come out, they don't have to show their faces because they've manipulated us so that we fight each other. And that's how they win. And that's why Q always refers to in his posts that they want to divide us. So this is really who's behind all of this. This is the Khazarian bloodline that goes back to being that, having that bloodline. Now look, folks, this is all disclosed in movies. If you look back at Jupiter Ascending, it's all in there.
Yeah, it
And they're
is.
also in the adrenochrome. If you look at Avatar, it's in there. They can transfer. It's not a problem. These are more advanced beings. They are in a higher dimension, but they're in the lower realm of that, and they're not going to make it because humanity is going to such a high vibration that they can't feed off of us anymore. So, if, you know, this is a theory. Have I seen them firsthand? No, I haven't. But is the evidence there to suggest that there's some kind of mass manipulation going on? Because I thought we were quite peaceful a few years ago, and all of a sudden, this racial division started coming out of nowhere because it was by design. It was socially engineered, and we know through this information that we've talked about that people are being um, mind controlled through electromagnetic manipulation, and this is the reality of it. So they're exposed. It's all out in the open now, folks, but it's up to you to have a discerning mind and to realize that we're not pitting one against the other. It just happens to be the fact how things moved and how things have to now get cleaned up, and that's really where we're at that process of
Yeah,
cleaning that up.
we are a part of a major experiment on this planet, in as much as we have colonizations
Mm,
from all over the place. Now, I would suggest that many of the people who, I mean, again, we did a lot of time studying on Newton's books about souls,
mhm.
about them reincarnating into various situations and so forth. I would suggest, that many souls who are advanced have been into physicality in many different varieties. So, in other words, one soul might have been embodied in a Native American. In the next body, they may have been an Afro American. In the next body, they may have been a Jew. In the next body, they may have been a hillbilly,
Exactly.
whatever. And
Right.
for soul development, we have been involved in a huge, huge experiment.
Hmm.
It's called a melting pot. In the United States, it's been called the melting pot. And so it seems really stupid to me that if somebody had several, perhaps even 100 different incarnations on this planet as all kinds of varieties of people, why would they come into one incarnation and start to persecute a people that perhaps they used to be?
Right.
This is completely crazy to me. I don't understand this.
Well, and so it's because, they wipe the memories during a reincarnation, and there's religions that don't believe in reincarnation, like Christianity, because then you would want to know why our minds get wiped. We would not recall our past memory, and that is so that we can continue to be manipulated. So, Winston, what do you have here?
Well, I'm just going to refer back again to this book, Pleiadian Perspectives, that we referred to in the past, because, in this, she has
Hmm.
uh, all the different ones, where they came from, when they came,
Hmm.
who they are today, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm suggesting that
Wow.
people who have been on this planet for, thousands of years and all these different incarnations and stuff have probably experienced, many of these types of bloodlines and stuff. So again, it don't make any sense to beat yourself in the head with this.
No, this is great stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
No, this is great stuff. No, and definitely get the book. And we have the link in the previous
Yeah.
reports that we have up on BitChute.
How much information have we given out this last year? How much information have we given out?
Oh, it's hard to tally that up. How to
It's
quant hard
hard
to
to
quant
measure
to
it.
quantify
The,
exactly.
the amount of information has come right across GoldFish reports,
Yeah,
country roads, the amount of information. Where would you go on the planet to get it?
exactly, Winston. But it's not just the quantity. It's definitely the
Yeah.
quality
Uh-huh.
of the information, which is even harder to find because it's all being scrubbed. So
Yeah.
a lot of it is being
So
scrubbed or
we've
it's
gone
being
all
distorted. Yeah.
we've gone all the way from the New Testament all the way through a psychiatrist that does hypnosis to find out about souls. I mean, the breadth of what we've gone into
Yeah,
here, should help people to evaluate themselves,
absolutely.
find out who you are, act accordingly. And when you finally come to the conclusion that you've been here a long time and you've had all these different experiences, why would you go and have bad words to say or persecute other types of people when probably in the last lifetime you were them?
Yeah.
It don't make any sense. So again, we need to put a little bit of a smile on our face and stop all this fighting and scrapping and carrying on, see if we can't get along so we can all mutually progress.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Right, exactly. We need to evolve. We need to get out of this rut of war and, warmongering, and realize that the people who want war are not our people. They're not
Yeah.
humans. They're not people who have the benefit of, they don't have, they're not thinking in terms of benefits for humanity. And so they just want to, essentially, like Winston said, feed off of our energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all connected to the ley lines. It's all connected to the pyramids. It's all connected to all of these things. It's all connected. Once all of this, maybe another time we can get into that and talk more about that at another time. But, you have talked about the initiation that Jesus went through and all the different initiation overcoming. And even in some future time, we're going to talk to some folks who go on these pilgrimages and who go through these real processes of overcoming the physical body to then go into the reflective, uh, uh, introspective aspect of themselves. And then after a certain, I mean, can you imagine how far do they go? And then, of course, the spiritual, you end up recognizing the spiritual, having spiritual epiphanies or realizations, or just connecting with that spiritual side of you, because that's all you have left on this pilgrimage that people go through, Winston. And I really can't wait to hear about that, because that's a really fantastic, it was just sounded so interesting to me. And I haven't
Yeah.
really seen many people do pilgrimages, but this is how long is this pilgrimage? Some of them,
Uh,
some of them.
well, just for your listeners, there's organizations in the United States. I forgot what it's called exactly, but they promote pilgrimages,
Hmm.
not only in the United States but also in Europe. The most famous of which is the
Uh,
Camino de Santiago,
yeah.
however you say it, de Compostela or whatever. Anyway, that one there goes across Spain to Santiago, where
Mm-hmm.
the bones or relics of Saint James the Apostle are traditionally being held. And that one there is like 480 miles.
That's
Now,
amazing.
right now, yeah, right now my significant other is on another pilgrimage right here within the United States, and they had started out, I think, somewhere around St. Louis, going south to see a pilgrimage is traditionally to some sacred site. And so this particular one they're working on now is heading south. I'm not really sure exactly where it's going to end up at. I think it's 380 miles.
It's a long way to walk, and it's all on foot. They're all walking. No
Yeah,
cars, no bicycles,
yeah.
no
Well, let's
scooters.
see, like you mentioned, it's what I call a walking meditation, because the only thing you have is what you can carry on your back. And so your backpack might weigh 20, 30, if it gets much heavier than that, you start throwing things away. But the value of it, like she had pointed out to me, what was first you have to overcome the physical the physical body, because it hurts to walk every day. 15, 18, 20 miles. Okay, so you have to overcome the physical self, and then at that point, when you overcome the physicality, then you get into what we basically call a meditative portion. So having put aside the physicality, now you have a chance to meditate and contemplate as you walk along And then typically the third part that had been mentioned was that once you've meditated, then the last part of your journey would turn to spirituality. And so it's all, I mean, it's going to take, it's going to take them almost a month to make
Wow,
this journey.
amazing.
But can you imagine, meditating for a month and overcoming the physical, getting into meditating,
Mm,
getting into the spiritual? So yeah, when we have the opportunity, we'll get some of that on there. And if people,
sure.
are interested in pilgrimages, just go do some research on the internet. And
Yeah.
there are probably groups near you.
Yeah. That's wonderful. If you
So
have the time, if you have the time and you can do something like that, maybe you could do a shortened version because it's hard in the
they do
city
have shortened versions,
to take a month
like the one
off.
they did down through New Mexico and stuff, down through Chimayo.
Yeah.
Was I think that was only like a
Yeah.
7 day journey, but it's always considerably shorter. But
Right.
this is one of the things that is
Sure.
trying to promote for
Right.
again, you know,
Find that spirit. Find out who you are, and you
find
might
out who
find
you
out
are.
if you go on one of these pilgrimages
You're
too.
gonna find out,
Have a
man,
little
when you
time to
got
spend with
when
yourself.
you got blisters on your feet.
Yeah.
You get up the next day and say, "Am I going to do this again?
Find out
Why am
what
I
you're
doing this?"
find out what you're made of.
Well, yeah, that's the physical part.
Yeah.
But then when
Exactly.
you get into these other elements of it, then you see the benefit of it because you have to overcome the physical first.
Right.
First thing you have to do. So anyway, yeah, we'll when we have a chance, we'll put together a program for that
Well,
so
after
people can
500
learn more.
miles, does everybody become an ascended master at that point since they've overcome all
No,
these other?
uh-uh. I haven't seen one yet.
Okay, so we want to put it in perspective, but it does help you start there, get there. I think it probably helps a lot. So, well, Winston, thank you so much for your wisdom again and this great information. And of course, this is kind of like the secret of the world. That we're being controlled and dominated by a race that's more
Yeah,
advanced than us, and they have an agenda to feed off of us. And as Preston James. Um, wrote about that this is, and he's a very liable man. I actually know him personally,
yeah,
and he's very credible, very
yeah,
concerned about, as he put that warning in there. So he knows that this is not something everybody can embrace yet, but that's why we're in the mess that we're in, and that's what Trump's trying to do. Is when he says drain the swamp, he is talking about lizards. So
yeah.
at the very least, and a few
Well,
snakes and other reptiles. Okay, so Winston, thank you. Have a great weekend. I will see you next week for another edition of Country Roads. We'll be back also on Monday with our POTUS report. It'll be a review of week 70, which is this week right now, and we review it at the end of the week. So we will be back with a POTUS report next week with Jim Fetzer, and we have other interviews lined up that we're working on. And we will also be back next week with another edition of Country Road. So, Winston, thank you so much. This was very enlightening today for a lot of things to think about over the weekend, folks.
well, I didn't mean to be angry or that and try to do an interview and stuff like that. But like I say, some of that stuff just hits my hot buttons and I go off. So I apologize for that. I shouldn't be that way. I'm trying to promote loving detachment here. I
Right.
got emotional,
Well, we're
emotionally
human. I
involved in
mean,
the
well,
situation.
it's a challenge for us. It's
So I
and
guess I'm my own worst enemy on that account. But it
but
just
we
gets to me
appreciate.
sometimes.
Well, you know what? Sometimes conviction says, communicates a lot more, and you do have conviction, and I think that's what people. I think that's what our viewers see in how you communicate. I don't think you get angry, Winston. I think you just have conviction, and that we have to respect you for because you know you don't want people coming on who are wishy-washy, and what you believe what you believe, and you stand for it. And so that's
Yeah,
conviction, and that's what right or wrong, it's conviction, and at least you know who you are, and that's what we can only hope for everybody else to do and not buy into this manipulation. And love our brothers and sisters, even though it might not be that easy, but we are all the same. We're just we're all brothers and sisters, and we can't let the ones who are deciding to go to war, let them go on the battlefield. We'll see how fast those nukes will disappear.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've got to stop using us to fight their wars and to extract their loosh, their feed off the negative energy. That's how
Yeah.
they survive. So we'll see everybody. Have a great weekend, and Winston, I hope your throat feels better there, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to visit with everybody. So everybody have a good week, and we'll see you again next time.
Okay, thanks. Have a great weekend, and this concludes this edition of the Goldfish Report.